Recently, I received a text from a friend that included a meme of the Seinfeld character Kramer covered in raw eggs and shells, repeating the words "Serenity Now, Serenity Now." And it's from that very funny episode where George Costanza's father, Frank, has received some advice from a self-help guru that when he's feeling stressed, he should say those words over and over again: "Serenity now, Serenity now." At one point, Frank is actually yelling "Serenity now," and his son George asks him, "Are you supposed to yell it?" And Frank says the man on the tape wasn't specific. I think that's what's so comical about it is that it's not working for anybody. In fact, Kramer is trying to use this technique, and it's not working for him, and eventually he ends up breaking and literally breaking thousands of dollars worth of computer equipment to take out his frustrations. Because the point of this is, the self-help technique of simply repeating the words isn't necessarily helping you get over your frustrations. It's a very funny take on the idea of serenity, and it's very easy it resonates with us because we've all experienced frustrations where you'd like to just say the word serenity now and have all of it go away and have peace and tranquility and emotional easiness and steadiness, but it's just not the way life works. When I think about the word serenity, I think about the Serenity Prayer. It's a prayer that I was introduced to, or our family was introduced to, actually, when I was a boy, when my father was working his way through alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous. It's their prayer. In fact, they are the ones that entitled it the Serenity Prayer in the 1950s when they started to officially use it. It's a very popular prayer. It goes something like this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It was a wildly popular prayer. It became something that was incorporated in not just Alcoholics Anonymous, but a number of 12-step programs. It's helped countless people gain some perspective in the midst of their struggles and addictions. But it's actually originally written by American theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, I believe in 1932, maybe 1932. And Niebuhr's version is a little bit different than the popularized version, which, as I said, is very helpful. But in Niebuhr's version, he puts courage first. He says, "Father, grant us courage to alter the things that must be altered, serenity to accept the things that cannot be helped, and insight to know one from the other." Niebuhr's prayer is a little bit different and very profound when you think about not just the way it's structured, but when it was written. Niebuhr is writing this prayer in 1932 in the midst of the Great Depression. The prayer is used in a sermon of his in 1943 and finds its way into a book of prayers and services for servicemen during the Second World War in 1944. If you think about when he originally wrote it, though, the call for courage to alter the things that must be altered is a powerful one given the circumstances of the day. And he isn't saying simply change what can be changed. He's actually calling for something that requires wisdom and insight to alter the things that must be altered, not just the things that can be altered. And that's a really profound thing to remember. And I think it must have been something that was on his mind when he wrote it, that he's looking at the Great Depression. People were going to have to change things that needed to be changed. Their geographical locations, their vocations, their standard of living, their way of life, the level of sacrifice that they were going to have to live according to. All those things were things that not just could be changed, but needed to be changed, even in terms of social structures and the way that work got done and all kinds of things that happened in the country during those very difficult years. The courage to alter the things that must be altered is what Niebuhr prayed for. And then the serenity to accept the things that cannot be helped, which is slightly different than serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. It actually, what he's saying is the serenity to accept the things that cannot be helped, the things that just happen, the things that, there are things we don't have control over, but it's even more significant than that. Things that can't be helped. They could not have been prevented. They just happened. And the other thing that I think about here is that he's actually talking about the need for acceptance that's almost along these lines. You can stand and scream at the night, but it won't make the sun come up any sooner. You can yell at the wind, but that won't make it lay down. You can scream at the rain, but it's going to rain until the clouds clear. The serenity to accept the things that cannot be helped. The other thing is that so often we think of serenity as emotional ease. In other words, that we just get to a point of peace and tranquility. And really the best synonym for the word serenity is probably the word composure. What Niebuhr writes in his prayer is, God grant us the composure, the clarity of mind, the calmness of emotion to accept the things that cannot be helped. And that's, a very helpful thing to have in moments when circumstances are pressing on you. And then finally, the insight to know one from the other. There is judgment that is required, discernment, wisdom, insight to be able to tell what needs to be changed, what must be altered, and what cannot be helped. And then when do I engage in changing things, and what do I change, and what do I accept? That requires some insight. And so Niebuhr's prayer is a profound one and a very biblical one. Pray for courage to alter the things that must be altered, serenity to accept the things that cannot be helped, and insight to know the difference one from the other. They're important life lessons to learn and help us to navigate life, particularly when things around us are frustrating us, and so much more helpful than saying serenity now and having nothing change. Because sometimes what needs to change is us and our attitudes and our outlooks. Years ago I was leading wilderness trips, and one of the early trips that I led was with a group of teenagers. It was a canoe trip, and it rained for 5 straight days on a 6-day trip. And by day 3 or 4, those campers were screaming at the clouds, stop raining, but it wasn't going to stop raining. We needed composure to accept the weather for what it was, because it couldn't be helped. And then the courage to alter what must be altered. And chief among those was our attitude and outlook, to find a way through it to change our attitude and to change the way that we did things, to paddle at different times of the day, to change the way that we structured camp, to set up our tarps differently, to dig trenches. The courage to alter what must be altered to weather the storm. And the composure to accept what cannot be helped, and the insight to know the difference. Those are lessons that I learned in the wilderness and leading trips. And it's why when we were raising our kids, we wanted to spend time in the outdoors, in the wilderness. We love those places. We love the wilds, and we love being out of doors. But also I wanted them to learn the important lessons that we learned. And in the course of some of those trips, we found ourselves in some pretty tough spots in wind and rain and weather. And there are things that you cannot change. And the one thing that time in the wilderness teaches us is that it will not accommodate itself to you. You must accommodate yourself to it. And that requires serenity, composure to accept the things that cannot be helped, and courage to alter the things that must be altered, even confronting our own preoccupation with convenience, and our own preoccupation with personal space, and our own attitudes when things don't go our way, when the weather isn't for us, to alter those things. That's a hard pill to swallow and a hard thing to do. But we need the courage to do it, to change the way that we carry out our days, and the insight and wisdom to know the difference, to exercise that kind of judgment. Niebuhr's prayer is a good one. And what it's asking us to pray for are things that benefit us in very practical ways.